an eventful week. I just want to know what you guys have going on in your lives. Hi, Simon. What's going on in your life?
Obviously, he made a rip it run recently.
Yeah, no, I made a rip it run today. We're having
and a bad haircut decision. I'm just going to call him out for it.
It's a great haircut decision. I don't make my haircut decisions for Garrett, so the world knows I make them for myself / the women in my life. But I think the important thing I want to talk about, our lovely production assistant Ian accused Dave of being a robot before we started recording, and it got me wondering if it's possible that the AI revolution that's going to stop World War III, to quote Palmer Luckey, is Dave. Dave, do you have any thoughts on stopping World War III yourself?
Yeah, I'm actually not here. I'm just really good at generative AI. I've got it showing up to all my meetings for me.
Not bad.
That's amazing. I need to download that.
I think the term is agentic. I think you're an agentic AI, right? Because you make decisions too.
Yeah, agent. Yeah, I'm an agent.
Yeah, there you go.
GPT 5.0 or something. I need to download the upgraded version.
I don't even know how to get on GPT. I'm going to be honest with you.
Are you chewing on a cigar right now?
Yeah, of course.
Looks delicious.
It's pretty good. Yeah.
You guys know you're not supposed to chew on them, right? That's not.
What do you want me to do? Suck on it?
There's a thing you do with it that includes fire. I've never done it myself. I've seen it.
Not in my home office, dude. This isn't the 1970s.
What are you in communist California? You're not allowed to smoke inside of your own home?
I mean, you're right. I could. You're totally correct. I could. I just don't want to.
It reminds me of that classic libertarian caucus clip where they're like, should you need a license to drive a car? And it's like, what's next? A license to operate a toaster in your own home. That's you right now with your unlit cigar.
Garrett, I was making a joke about Simon's haircut too, but I was actually complimentary. I don't know if you remember the movie Euro Trip.
Great movie.
Matt Damon has a cameo where he says things Scotty doesn't know.
Yeah, Dave's been comparing me to Matt Damon all week, and I've really been enjoying it, if I'm being honest.
Simon's got the Matt Damon cameo Scotty doesn't know.
I don't think anyone else you brought it up to has remembered Euro Trip, which is a real classic.
Euro Trip, it's made me feel Tom Green. Tom Green, right? I mean, this is Tom Green. This is like Tom Green in his heyday.
You're a monster. Road Trip is Tom Green, and then Euro Trip was like the pseudo sequel that included Scotty Doesn't Know with Matt Damon in the intro, and the best usage of "This Isn't Where I Parked My Car" in the history of jokes. So everyone should go watch the movie for the "This Isn't Where I Parked My Car."
Whenever I look at Simon, I never think Matt Damon.
Great. Man, this haircut's really done bad things to Garrett. I'm never gonna stop.
Who's your favorite this week, Simon? Who's your favorite this week?
Yeah, that's right. No, it's all Dave.
Dave, such a brown noser.
Last week it was Garrett though, because we had a beautiful opening ceremony for the new Reveal headquarters.
Yeah, that's right. Not only that, but the United States Marine Corps Reserve, they made a mistake, or specifically Manpower made a mistake, and I got promoted to Lieutenant Colonel as well, which is, I genuinely think they made a mistake. I don't know why this would occur. It means they pay me more to be the same old guy. I just don't really get it.
Well, the good news is I know a dozen different disrespectful ways to say Colonel, and we can work them into all of our conversations moving forward. Dave, I always forget that you're a colonel too, so I'll try to do that as well.
Yeah, but there's got to be very few of them in the Marine Corps Reserve, right? Isn't that a pretty small community?
No,
I mean, that's got to be much more of an achievement than it is on the Army side.
No, there's definitely too many of them.
I was gonna say there's definitely too many. Yeah, too many. I don't know what the absolute number is though. That's a good question. Too many is the answer though. Too many is the answer, and every community's got its 10%. Now the question is, am I in that 10% or?
I saw some news today that the goings on with Futures Command is that they're going to trim the senior head count. Have you guys seen that?
Yeah.
No.
This is as the crotchety former junior enlisted, I have long believed a great defense innovation start would be to reduce the number of generals. So I'm pretty excited about the possibility of just trimming the head count at that level.
At risk of having some friends or customers or advocates in some of these places, I fundamentally agree with you, Simon. With the what the article suggests, or what the reporting suggests, is that they're going to reduce, reduce some of these places from a 4-star command, and they're going to consolidate some program offices, and a lot of these, like Army Futures Command, cross-functional team, a lot of these things that were created to like cross-pollinate, coordinate, communicate, that weren't granted additional authority, funding, whatever, attempt to remove a layer of bureaucracy, which I actually think is correct.
It's one of those funny self-interest conundrums, I think, because I think if you asked even most general officers and said, hey, what do you think about the number of general officers today versus, World War II, Gulf War, they'd say we have too many. But I don't think anyone's going to raise their hands and be like, you should start with my star and like take that away, right? I don't expect anyone to do that. But I remember it was after we had mostly pulled out of Iraq, there was like a point there where like a quarter of all the troops in Iraq were general officers or something crazy, because there were so few troops, and the only thing left were these like really bureaucratic administrative generals.
I have a question. What percentage of our listenership do you think is comprised of general and flag officers? In other words, my real question is, how many inflammatory things can we say here about general and flag officers and stay completely above water?
Totally. We're really preaching to the choir here. It's just a room full of people who've never going to get to be general officers going, I agree. Take their stars away.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the Doge the fat middle, and Doge the upper ranks of the Pentagon. I'm in that mode of thinking, and love seeing what I'm seeing. Well, welcome back to the Goat Rodeo. I'm your host, Garrett Smith, founder and CEO at a company called Reveal, joined by regular co-host Dave Cottle. Hi, Dave, and Simon Kuhn. Hi, Simon. And this is a place where we talk about geopolitics at the crossroads of defense technology, venture capital, policy, national security, and everything in between. So I'm just going to launch us straight into the first item on the docket. This is probably the big news of the week as it pertains to U.S. national security, budgeting, spending. The House is coming back from recess, and they've got a massive budget reconciliation workload on their tables. We saw draft language from the Armed Services Committee that outlines where we think the reconciliation plus-ups to the national security apparatus, and specifically the Defense Department, are going to come. Simon, do you want to orient us to this and then maybe provide some high-level commentary on what this means?
Yeah, so it's, like all things in Congress, a shifting target. But the language we saw from the House Armed Services Committee, I think it was late Sunday that it came out, actually. But
yep.
The understanding is that language was actually worked out between House and Senate Armed Services already. So the two national security committees have come together and sort of agreed upon $150 billion and this broad set of like, here's where it's all going to shake out. That text is public. It's online. There's a section by section. It's not super detailed. It's not a hard read. These are not like intense budget documents. They are broad strokes. Like when you read money for the southern border, it just says $5 billion for the southern border. Get out there and do it. So you're going to see the executive branch really in charge of how that spending looks once the money hits. The bigger question is, when does the money hit, right? And this is something I think a lot of people in our space have seen a lot. The national security side of the House in Congress has a lot of agreement and a lot of bipartisanship, and then it gets bogged down in the bigger national conversation. So the House will likely move its defense reconciliation package pretty easily. The Senate, I've heard, may do a even more truncated process, so not do a markup and not have members vote on it inside of the committee for individual pieces. And then it just kind of sits on the shelf until everybody else catches up to their pieces of the reconciliation process. And that's everything like taxes and these big cuts across the government, the big domestic policy agenda items of the Trump admin. At the beginning of the week, everyone was saying they're going to get this done before Memorial Day. 2 days later, everyone's saying July 4th is the new target.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yes.
I'd heard Memorial Day or, end of May, that sort of timeline. Yeah.
So Thune, Senator Thune, the leader on the Senate side, has already said we're aiming for July. Me being a cynic, not the font of optimism, I would guess if they're lucky, they get it done by the bitter end of July. Because you got to remember, they got to do everything else at the same time. To spend half the year working on this means that the regular order NDAA has to happen and the regular order appropriations bills need to go through their process. So they're not going to be able to spend all their time just focused on reconciliation. They're going to have to do all the normal functions of running the government as well.
So, question. Often we hear about the stress of program managers and acquisitions folks, the stress that comes from either a late CR or a late fiscal year appropriations package being signed into law, which compresses the time available in the fiscal year for them to expend that budget. Does that mean that, let's say that they get this done in July, the end of the fiscal year is September 30. Does that mean that they have to spend all of this identified money? We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars before the end of the fiscal year. In other words, no, that's not what that means.
This is special money that exists off to the side of the ordinary process.
Okay, interesting.
All this money is technically mandatory dollars, and we don't need to get into the details of mandatory versus discretionary. Sure. But to that specific point, this is purely additive funds that will arrive and will sit until it's expended. In fact, when the Biden admin did this with a Democrat-controlled Congress, by the time the Trump admin came around, there was still unspent dollars from the last time this had been done, which they sort of snatched back. So it could sit for a very long time. Now, the other question that what you brought up really digs at is we haven't seen a president's budget yet for fiscal year 26. That should come out in May. I mean, traditionally, April is when you'd like to see it. House appropriators are already getting their ducks in a row. That is the bill that has to stay on time. And this is going to be a real bellwether for how well that's going to work for the next 4 years, because this year is the least amount of political pressure on that process that you're going to see during the entire Trump admin, right? As you get closer to midterms and you get closer to the presidential election, those bills become more difficult because people don't want to give other sides the win. But right now, stakes are the lowest. This is your best shot to have a regular order process, and we're going to see.
Dave, you live primarily down in the kind of the plumbing of the department where budget gets decided, it passes, whatever, and it trickles down through the department and it ends up at program managers who are actually expending the budget. Is this your observation? Is this a happy thing that's going on with reconciliation? A bunch of extra money getting dumped on PMs? Is it burdensome? Are they frustrated? Are they happy? Are they stressed about the timeline to execute? Are the priorities clear? How do you perceive everything downstream of what Simon's talking about?
Yeah, so I think the happy part is it's definitely an indicator that we're in the right business at a good time to be in this industry. I think the point that Simon made is the important one here, which is these are really, really big rocks that have not been broken into small rocks. So the level that I'm engaged with, they don't know much more to make of it than that at this point, right? What is how is that actually distributed and trickled out, and who's going to win and who's going to lose? And there's probably a little bit of knife fighting program to program and office to office. So the part where I get excited is when we have customer sets that are winning or expanding their scope or what have you. We just don't have that level of fidelity yet.
Yeah. I mean, we're seeing, if I can maybe nudge us into an adjacent topic here, in that reconciliation language, we're seeing a pretty significant plus up for programs like, one-way attack and kamikaze drone activities, which, that's been long in the making. Small drone stuff has been top of mind for many folks in our industry. And has become a hotter and hotter topic with directed requirements and learnings from Ukraine and elsewhere being repatriated to the United States and being funneled into our defense industrial base. It looks like something like $100 billion being pumped into related programs around that. We know that the Defense Innovation Unit (DIU) has been deeply implicated with a lot of that stuff. I'm seeing, $2 billion, which is an effective tripling of their annual budget, going into the DIU coffers. Who knows exactly what that's all about, or maybe you do. Are these dollars likely targeting kind of the vanguard next generation technologies that we know the department needs to be, adopting and fielding, or is it going somewhere else? Is it wasteful? Do you have any perspective on that?
That's the hope, and I think DI is a good example, and one we also have obviously direct experience with from our company. Um, that's the hope, is that all of those dollars are going to accelerate, the highest priority capabilities. I think that it was a little worrisome to me when we started seeing news articles about expanding the physical presence and sort of front door, I call them recruiting stations of DIU across the country. That was a little concerning to me, just because I would rather that resourcing go into transition capabilities to production, and getting capabilities in the field that are prioritized amongst the combatant commanders, rather than more front doors to bring more companies in that then don't have a transition pathway after their initial prototyping or OT body of work with DIU.
So real quick, I want to say something on that while you're on that.
Go ahead.
This is a perfect example of, like, this thing is so big. There's so much to look at. At the same time that there's $2 billion for DIU, there's $1 billion just for mysterious small UAS purposes, and then another $1 billion for procuring innovative technologies. So I could foresee a world where the DIU front door just exists to be the front door, and useful pots of money for transition and follow-on maybe exist elsewhere. That's entirely possible. So, I'm not saying it's happening, but like this set of reconciliation dollars, the more I look at it, the more I'm like, what are we doing here? Where's this going to go?
That's the risk. That's exactly the risk that I'm outlining. Does it happen? Problem identification, technology recruiting, or technology scouting to bring the company in that's a non-traditional contractor, and then like prototype something that meets a need. It's prioritized amongst the combatant commands or whatever. How do we actually get that out of DIU and into something that looks like production, or is DIU going to do that in-house? That's my point. I mean, from DIU's history from 2016, like I did a lightweight, scrape, and it depends on how you chop it up, but of 450-ish prototype contracts, only about 52 to 62, depending on how you calculate it. This is reported by like GovCon Wire and defense.gov. Only 50 to 60-ish have transitioned into like a soldier's using it in the field, part of a program sort of capability, which is probably better than a lot of places in the DoD, but still not good. So if they're going to get a budget that's tripled, I've seen some reporting that's around some of that money is to directly support combatant commanders, which would be great. A significant portion of it to expand APFIT, which is its own, bridge across the Valley of Death, which would also probably be very positive. I just don't want, I don't want the front door, the aperture, to be blown wide open, and to still not have a credible pathway over into production or transition.
I just looked this up, and I'm not trying to like live fact check you, Dave, but given that there's a bit of uncertainty around this transition rate, and what we're talking about is transitioning from a primarily R&D contracting footing into production, right? Aspen Institute put out a report, and this is a couple years old at this point. They're claiming a 50% transition rate, which would be like crazy good. I doubt that number, but that would be a crazy good number. Some of the other front doors that are out there include like Incutel for the intelligence community via the Incutel, which is a venture capital outfit that basically like builds work programs for intelligence community customers. They have I think historically a compelling but not especially exciting transition rate, and maybe it means that the mission partner on the other side of it just isn't as interested once they're done with the prototype and moving into production, or maybe it's a less educated vendor that is on contract, and they don't know how to nudge things along in the way that we do and the way that a lot of other successful companies do. But this notion of transition rate, I think, speaks to as maybe a key metric, speaks to the current Trump administration kind of drive for efficiency and productivity across its many, many lines of effort. And this is just maybe one of those manifestations. Do you think that with a bunch of extra capital, DIU is going to increase its transition rate or the other way or otherwise?
I think it's the other way around. I want to jump in again. I think it's this pots of money going to other actual PEOs within the military to be good receivers of DIU's energy. And you dump, like if you jump back 10 years ago and you put $4 billion into DIU, you're not going to get any good outcomes because nobody's bought into what DIU does yet. And I think that's where this thing starts to get really interesting, and why I do think it's a good time to blow the front door open, because I think the wider that door is, the louder the demand signal is for program executive offices to get it together, right?
Maybe this is a tactical example or a practical example. Reveal in its early days was a named subcontractor on a DIU prototyping OT. At least that's what I recall it being. And I remember most of the way through the period of performance on that contract, it became clear that the DIU, its organization, its PMs, hadn't really done the work to create or fashion a safe production landing place for our project on the other side of an R&D activity. And, I'm not casting shade here. I'm just, this was in the first 2 to 3 years of DIU actually
DIU 1.0.
Totally.
Yeah.
This was DIU 1.0. No fault. They're learning. But at the same time, without actually solving that transition problem, DIU will lose its shine in the eyes of the private sector innovators and the entrepreneurial class who are trying to bust in. They're going to find other doorways. They're going to find side and back doors that are not DIU. And maybe those exist, maybe they don't. Maybe they're being consolidated in DIU. Maybe DIU is improving and it won't kind of lose that luster. But that was our experience, and I know that we were not alone. And for companies like ours, R&D activities, paid R&D work, so to speak, is extremely valuable. It's like a necessary on-ramp to working with customers, getting customer access, getting stickiness, establishing contracting pathways, champions, all that stuff. It's really, really important. But at the end of the day, the only thing that really matters is moving into production. And so, my hope is that this is not just additional resourcing into an outfit that hasn't figured it out, that they've actually figured it out. And despite the shade that I do cast at DIU and the innovation kind of wings of the current DoD, I've cast shade because they've given massive production contract awards to legacy vendors like AeroVironment, and rightly so potentially. But what they did with that was prove the plumbing. They can prove that they can move large amounts of money onto production contracts and do that successfully. Now, whether that actually has a mission impact or not, I think is up to others to decide. But one would hope that kind of large contracting activity actually ends up resulting on behalf of smaller companies, like the non-traditional set that Dave has referenced.
I think that speaks to the point of, even if the front door is phenomenal, if the thick middle isn't ready to receive what they're doing, then this really doesn't go anywhere. So I think that, and I'm guessing some of this because I wasn't a part of these internal deliberations regarding Replicator and AeroVironment. But if I'm DIU and I want to make sure that physical things actually appear for the money that I'm spending, I'm going to go to somebody that I know can crank them out right now and has name cachet and has been in the field and all that good stuff, because you're trying to show mass. You're trying to show that thing. I also think one of the problems that are our side of this equation, the innovative side, is a lot of times I meet folks that look at DIU and they build this idea of what they think DIU should be. And if it doesn't do that for my company, then I'm mad at them. And DIU does a lot of different things. And I think particularly when you think about the intellectual underpinnings of DIU right now that Michael Brown wrote in, A Hedge for America, his vision of that was for DIU to buy a capability off the shelf and get it out there, and for there to be no follow-up. It's cell phones. I'm going to buy 10,000 cell phones. I'm going to put it in your hands, and that's it. There's no program of record for this. There's no follow-on. When I want this capability again, I'll go buy a new thing. And that's not going to line up with the traditional PEO model or the traditional technologies like rifles that soldiers are going to carry every day and out forever. It's a different lane.
I love that Simon always references rifles as an innovation, success. Dave's got beef with this topic.
Rifles is the most important thing in the military, and I will never get off of this point.
I never disagreed. I never disagreed with you on that. I never, and we won't dredge that one back up.
Yeah, Garrett's trying to curveball me about my other.
I'm trying to.
I want to jam the COCOMs in here though, because there is one thing that DIU is doing now that it wasn't doing before, which is a little more aligned with this idea, and it's spending big pots of money to solve COCOM problems, which traditionally would end up on an unfunded list and go nowhere, and the Title 10 entities didn't necessarily facilitate. I think that like in the middle to long term, DIU spends a lot more time doing that as opposed to funneling people into these Title 10 acquisition activities, because that puts capability into the warfighter who's furthest on the edge, fastest, and maybe doesn't need to be a 20-year program of record for this really specific widget that only works on the island chain, right?
As they should. COCOMs, AppFits, that's where I hope the funding gets. Because my point about this, Simon, is like, everybody, all three of us were lied to by a recruiter at some point, right?
Not me.
Like, you guys were both lied to.
Shout out George Jones. That guy was awesome.
So the way that I think about DIU, or at least when we were engaged with it, was DIU is Department of Defense recruiting. It's a recruiting office. It's just not recruiting people. It's recruiting technology firms. And the way that you recruit a technology firm to come and work for the Department of Defense is, hey, we're going to make it really easy. So it's not scary. Like, we're not going to wear uniforms. Here's this flexible OT. We'll hang out on Google Meets or whatever. And you all need professional program management. You all need T&M infrastructure in your company. It'll be really easy to work with. But then at the end of that prototyping exercise, then they go, oh yeah, by the way, but here's this program office over here. That's the only people that can really scale you.
Right.
Go get your CMMC done. Go get your ATO done. Oh, by the way, like, they don't have any requirements for this in this program. That's the piece that I'm recommending we shore up if we're going to triple the budget. Is we can get all the way to solving a combatant commander's problem in house.
Yeah, I mean, you thought you were going to be a door kicking infantry marine when the recruiter told you, oh yeah, just take the open contract, right? We'll make it easy, sign here, take the open and then all of a sudden you find out that you're actually a bulk fuel specialist or a water purification marine or whatever. Oh yeah.
And Garrett, to your point, like, again, you're fact checking me live, which I welcome. I think it really matters what your definition of transition is, right? I'm sure that we can claim 50% transition. I'm sure that my stats are also correct, depending on what your definition is of 10% transition.
I'm sure you're right.
The way that I'm defining it is, a production contract or integration into a program of record or widespread fielding. If you do a DIU prototyping event and one instance of your thing or 10 of your hardware thing go and provide value to an individual unit, that's great. But I wouldn't consider that a successful transition.
Yeah, I mean, you could consider the award of a production contract with ceiling, an IDIQ or a production OT, as being a successful transition. But many of those, I'm sure, get awarded those kinds of contract vehicles and then transact literally 0 times with an actual production customer. So yeah, I'm sure you're right. And also, and it's, in the interest of these organizations to perhaps like make their transition rate look better on the surface, so that that recruiting flyer that you post on the gym door at the high school attracts more recruits. So I'm totally down with that.
So real quick,
we've heard a little. Sorry, go ahead, Simon.
I want to put one last fine point on this as we're thinking about reconciliation itself. DIU, there's a section for scaling low cost weapons, and that's where you see the $2 billion for DIU. That section is like $20 billion, and DIU is getting $2 billion. So it's significant, but there's way more money that's going to that other piece. DIU is by no means getting the preponderance of the 150. Sure. So let's hope that the stuff that's going to the plumbing is equally impactful.
Well, and I'm looking at
much more impactful.
And I'm looking at like percentage growth in terms of their operating mandate and resourcing. And that is an effective tripling, right? Last fiscal year, they had something like $950 million of budget. I get that this is magic, secret, different money that doesn't conform to the fiscal year cycle and the normal budgeting process. But I mean, that is an effective tripling of the DIU mandate and budget. And one will hope. Yeah. Dave, I think you mentioned this concept of like LPOP on-ramp activities as DIU kind of sprawls a little bit to eat up more of the innovation front door. What should we, I don't know if this is a you question or a Simon question, but what's the difference between the conceptual DIU on-ramp and, NSID, the National Security Innovation Network, or the Mission Acceleration Centers, all these other ostensible front doors? Like how does a young company even decide, where to put their chips, where to put their resources and energy? Like, what can you help handhold me here?
Let me say mechanically real quick that the DIU on ramps are Ensign. This is Ensign's budget. to create DIU on ramps. Incident's a part of DIU. That's one thing.
That's right.
The mission acceleration centers are administratively operated differently, but similarly received money from the DoD on that line. It was the kind of two programs coming out of the same pot of money. So that's my flag there. Dave, I'm interested to hear your opinion.
Yeah, so I don't understand. I mean, I think that some of these tech scouting, recruiting things, whether it's the in-person on-ramp offices or the tours where you go around each city in America and talk about the benefits of the SBIR program or of DIU. I think some of it is a bit redundant. The part that I don't understand is the need to spread out geographically to all these different centers. In my mind, the way to do this is, as you work through job mill PFP or through the capability development process, if you're trying to solve a problem for a combatant commander, you would, do some market research and then specifically go to the Center of Excellence on the industry side, where your analysis of that research leads you. I'm a little worried that if we, pick winners in cities and put the on-ramp offices there for technology recruitment, you're going to get what each of those places does really well, which may not jive exactly with the priorities of the capabilities that we're looking for. Do you disagree with that? You look like you disagree.
Yeah, well, there's more challenges there, right? And that's a super parochial, like the needs of the tactical warfighter are the only thing that we're talking about in this space, which in a lot of levels, when we talk about a program called the National Security Innovation Network, it is making resilient American industry. And whether that's defense or regular industry, it is about like connecting these non-traditional communities and making sure that they're apart so that we have things like redundancy and specializations in different towns. So in my opinion, as I look at it, you're probably going to see an on-ramp in all 50 states. Deciding which city in each 50 state, you're going to be picking a winner at some point. There'll be a competitive process.
You're going to see an on-ramp in both North and South Dakota?
I'd bet my money.
Really?
Yep.
Low population density? Is that just, by fairness and mandate, the same way that every state gets 2 senators?
The on-ramps are extremely cheap. You're talking like less than $5 million to operate an on-ramp. Usually less than half of $5 million. You find oftentimes a university that has space and staff that you don't have to pay for in their entirety, and you kind of create these regional front doors. So I think as far as like the actual DIU on ramps, you're going to see them proliferated and not be super robust in these low population, low density states, but they'll still be there because there are things happening there. There are people starting businesses in North and South Dakota. And the American advantage is the talent and the guy who's building stuff in his barn and is doing things far flung across America. I've seen that firsthand many times.
So you're thinking that each on-ramp might be different in size, scope, mandate,
Totally.
It would have to be because, you compare the potential for tech disruption, innovation, company formation, capitalization in a state like California or New York or Texas versus North or South Dakota. And I love my Dakota brothers and sisters. I just, it's a different scale of potential there.
And different states are doing different things. I mean, if you looked at North Dakota 40 years ago, you never would have been like, this is the home of the drone of the GWAT.
Yeah.
Right? Like the Reapers and the RQ9s, RQ4s, all that stuff. That's all tested, evaluated, built. Like they built a massive ecosystem there just because one day they decided they were going to do it. And they used what they had at hand, wide open spaces, out of the way. We can do this here and we can do some cool stuff. I think it's a totally worthy investment for DIU to like help different states get good at whatever it is they want to get good at and help them bring that talent and that expertise in the front door.
So
maybe.
Hold on.
Maybe.
Maybe. From the other direction here, Simon, you're saying, okay, like this, we're talking about DIU tripling its budget, but that's a drop in the bucket in comparison to the, whatever 20 billion that we are intending to spend, or the $20 billion increase on autonomous systems and low cost weapons, right? Yeah, but So I know that, I know that it's not published. We just sort of have to guess. But where do you think that $15 billion is going? Because my assumption is that we're talking about DIU tripling its budget because most of that money is probably going to CCA, right? Collaborative Combat Aircraft. It's going to unmanned surface and undersea vehicles for Department of the Navy. It's going to Golden Dome, right?
I'm going to cheat a little bit here. And I'm not going to tell everyone where all the money is going. Everyone should go hire a lobbyist and get their own chart. But Dave, I've sent you the chart. It's in the Slack. Highly recommend you take a look. And I can tell you, like the DIU on-ramps, for example, it's going to get $50 million. And that will be the only money going to the on-ramps out of the reconciliation bill. And then other pots will be spent in other places. And the chart is not super specific yet. But it's not all going to CCA. No, I mean it's split up in a bunch of different ways, and there's a lot of people who have participated in shaping what that looks like. AUVSI, right, the Association for the Autonomous Industry, essentially for autonomous drones and drones in general, is running press releases already about their success in making sure that $1 billion goes towards the small UAS industry, which is in reconciliation. Now, exactly what that means is my question. Because you could spend $1 billion on just components, just motors, drones themselves, software for the drones, right? There's a million ways to slice that, but it's not so vague as to be like, oh, CCA is going to eat all the lunch here. It's not. It's split up into a bunch of different places.
Well, all right. So hold on. I'm going to invoke my my inner Mark Andreessen and say, the future for America depends on it remaining not just relevant, but perhaps dominant in terms of economy, ability to force project its hard power in the form of its military and national security state, and its technological advantages. So economy, technology, and force projection, right? And as we discussed the last time we convened, and I'll say sidebar, apologies for not posting last week. We were all really busy with all kinds of other stuff. So if you missed us for a week, I feel for you. And anyway, as we discussed the last time, 2 weeks ago, in this forum, trying to compete against the United States adversaries and competitors on their terms using their methods. So, a statist, autocratic, high degree of centralized authority around a relatively authoritarian regime where they can direct resources, they can reduce barriers very easily, versus our relatively messy democracy. It would appear that the strength of our system is in its decentralized market-driven approach as opposed to a highly centralized authoritarian approach. And if that's true, and we're just opening up additional kind of target surface area for rent seeking through government programs where everybody's going to lobby to get a piece of the pie, and it doesn't necessarily depend on the market forces to generate the innovative solutions to big problems. That to me sounds a little bit like a statist approach to solving a big national security problem. So,
you're selling to the state, Garrett. We're in a special.
No, I know that.
They're not spending hundreds of billions of dollars the way the Chinese do to, hey, go build this. They're putting a couple $1 million into these states to incentivize them to think about these issues.
Totally.
And then the market does have to catch it from there, right? There's no to our love and hate, there is really no big catcher's mitt full of billions of dollars for each and every one of these states. There's a little bit of money to get you thinking about the problem and, hopefully incentivize talent to do something other than be a TikTok influencer.
Totally. I just invoked my inner Mark Andreessen. I'm going to invoke my inner Paul Kwan from General Catalyst, who I think we've referenced this on the pod before, but a number of weeks ago said in an Atlantic Council forum that the NATO Innovation Fund put $1 billion of pooled state capital from Europe into what is effectively a multilateral state-run venture capital fund. And his complaint was, why didn't you just issue that amount of contracting awards for production capability? Because then you would have inspired $4 billion worth of, or some enhanced pot of venture capital from the private sector to continue to bet on success. So here's my fear, is that these kind of front doors will start being rent-seeking targets as opposed to contract awards. And again, to reference our bias toward production contracts, right? So if it ends up being a rent-seeking target, that will be business as usual. I don't think it'll help us innovate. If they do actually end up accelerating toward production contract awards and it inspires more private sector activity, I think that's the win, right? I think that is the win for the United States defense industrial base and for those of us who are participating in what I lovingly refer to as the defense technology renaissance. So we are seeing the rise of, I'm going to pivot topics here by a degree or two, but we're seeing the rise of mostly venture capital infused, I'm going to call it studios or venture studios or hatcheries or incubators or accelerators, but specific for the national security use case. Recent announcements by our friends at Harpoon Ventures and Shield Capital, an outfit called Black Flag, which I think is sort of, aligned with this general message. Our friends at Fairwater Labs, they're a defense technology hatchery and incubator that operate kind of diffused across the United States, but centralized out of Silicon Valley proper, and other outfits like Valinor, which is a joint project, at least in part funded by Anduril Industries, where they seed innovative company formation with problems or opportunities that Anduril and its partners see, but might not be above the cut line in terms of big upstart investment and product generation, but may at some point be really solid bets down the road. So I think, Simon, I'm not to put words in your mouth, but I think you have potentially criticized this grouping of defense venture studios as effectively privatizing what should be a government set of programs. Did I put words in your mouth, or am I capturing what you said correctly?
Not exactly how I think I would phrase that, but I do think I think to use more Garrett like terminology, that the market is the market is creating a thing to solve the lack of a government thing. They're connecting dots for the government.
Yeah,
essentially.
I mean, this is historically what the legacy primes have done, right? They kind of infuse themselves into the acquisitions environment. They participate in long-term requirement shaping. They then participate in long-term contract awarding and awards and then execution on the contracts. They bill a bunch of services. They do a lot of system integration, but it's a slow, minimally innovative thing that I think in recent years has proven ineffective in delivering cutting-edge technology that actually meets the current day mission.
Yeah, I'm not sure I see the proof in the pudding either, if I'm being honest with you.
Right.
And I've expressed this to you in other venues where I see a lot of the activity from folks who are very successful or relatively successful in this innovation space as trying to wrap their arms around as much of the pie as possible and keep it for themselves and then dole it out however they want. I see just pulling the ladder up behind you a lot of times. And I think that sucks unequivocally. And I know that there's a market reaction to that the capitalist version is to seek a monopoly. It is to capture as much of everything as you can and not let others win. But I think there is a national security imperative for the government to continually essentially kneecap people and force competition so that we don't get stuck into these big, stagnant, old programs that never get replaced. And you wake up one day and China has out innovated you simply because one company or another has locked down this program for decades.
God, I hope the government doesn't decide to kneecap us. What would that even look like, and why is that the recommendation?
What would that look like? It's a great question. Regulation is a really heavy, ham-fisted way of solving these problems. But it does look like government involvement and not allowing, honestly, contractors to run your program shops simply because you don't have the head count. And that's my biggest fear when we talk about things like Doge is, are we actually cutting positions, or are we just going to let a bunch of companies, replace government employees with a guy in a branded polo shirt, and he does the functions of the govy that went away, but he kind of puts his foot on the scale for X, Y, or Z contractor. Yeah,
we see plenty of that fat middle. Dave, you encounter this type all the time. Do you feel particularly hamstrung or kneecapped in terms of engaging with the acquisitions and production contracting environment by kind of that incumbent layer of legacy prime provided contractors who are doing, quote, the job of the government PM, close quote?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Every day, and I have for
Sorry for the leading question. That was a leading question. It was
The
very
eloquence
like-
here at the Goat Rodeo is off the charts.
Absolutely, I have for 10 years or however long I've been doing this. Obviously, I prefer the startup environment over the working for one of the legacy defense primes. But yes, massive barrier, especially
Well, what's the solution though? Like if the government acquisition cadre doesn't have the capacity to do the job, and they need the support and partnership of private industry, and their trusted go-to easy button is the legacy prime contractor who's held, some big, services contract or systems integration contract for 10 years, and it's the easy thing that's always in that. I forget which quadrant it's in the typical quad chart. The bottom right, yeah, the bottom right.
You're describing an impossible situation to solve.
Yeah, I don't think there is a solution.
So what?
Yeah.
The impossible answer is really good talent management within the United States government, right? That's the answer. Which is really hard, right? But if you have the best in class for any given science, any given capability area, working on behalf of the United States government, that is the best outcome. And that is the best solution. Then you're relying less on CETAs and the defense prime contractors to be that layer of, integrating all the things that you need and managing all those projects and efforts. And I don't know how you fundamentally solve the talent management problem.
I think it's got to look something like the checks and balances that we use in our own federal government, right? You want friction there. I don't want a perfect solution that becomes stagnant. I want everyone to constantly be thinking, I need to improve and do better. Otherwise, the government's going to come around and kneecap me. I want them to live in fear of kneecapping, and I want the winner to be the guy with the best thing. And it has to be like a constant bloodletting to keep people on their toes and keep them competitive.
You know what I think? You know what I think is happening right now, and maybe this sounds a little bit conspiracy theory kind of thinking, but there's this whole notion of the revolving door. One of the reasons why the legacy primes are so entrenched is because general officers and senior civilians who reach, a position of power and influence end up leaving government after, doing the contract management and acquisitions kind of thing. And they find themselves in senior positions over at Boeing and RTX and Lockheed Martin and the, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think that, so this is what I think is happening. I think the revolving door is being slowed down, maybe even shut down with the legacy primes, and there's a new set of revolving doors. And again, conspiracy thinking here, but like, who's the new grouping? It's high-powered, well-endowed venture capital firms. It is the companies that they promote and bring into the defense industrial base environment. This is the Palantirs and the Andurils and the Shield AIs and the et ceteras of the world. And first off, I'll say that it's definitely going to be better than the legacy primes, right? Like, this is an upgrade at some level, if this is in fact the case. But it sounds like the same old thing. And in 25 years, we're going to have to go through yet another renaissance and revitalization. Tell me I'm wrong.
It depends on whether or not the government takes its eye off the ball. If you leave it alone, it will stagnate again. You get to stay.
But the government never does that.
Not when I was in it.
I feel like this is really logical and predictable. This is the nuclear arms race all over again. This is ICBMs. This is the genesis of Silicon Valley. It's just a new weapon. It's new tools, and they're really important. And they will usher in a new level of attention and funding into defense technology. And they will create probably 5 to 10 big winners, like we did last time when we created all the Lockheeds and Raytheons of the world. And those firms will probably do things differently and faster and better than we have for a while. And then they will look exactly like the same revolving door Lockheed Martins and Raytheons that we know today within 5 or 10 years.
Yeah. I think that's what's going to happen too. I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think that's what's going to happen too. And so the fight is be one of those. Right. And that's why I think there's so much like heat and capital and resourcing and competition and all that stuff going on in our piece of the industry, which is the upstart class, because we all want to be the next RTX. We want to be the next Boeing. We want to be the next Palantir. I mean, we want to do that. Right. And we also, I think, believe that that's a virtuous endeavor, even if long term it creates this new class of neo primes or whatever. Right. Like, but I mean, Simon, you invoked the word monopolist. Every every startup worth its salt wants to be a monopolist. This is Peter Thiel 101. I mean, this is, you should endeavor to be the monopolist. You should behave in the most hardcore calculating monopolist mindset that you possibly can deploy. And that's what winning looks like. But to your point, government needs to put in the guardrails so that you don't lock in long-term stagnation
and the
amongst
incentives.
a new class.
The government, we're still at the end of the day selling to the government, which is inherently not a capitalist game, right? There's a huge element to our business that is just not capitalism because we're selling to the state. And to, Paul Kwan's quote, which I think is great, if the government continues to create novel contracting mechanisms that are meaningfully, rewarding to new companies, venture capital will keep investing in these companies. And then those companies can go hire people coming off of the Hill and hire people coming out of the Pentagon and get right into the fight. And I think that's the important thing to maintain. It's not a perfect process, but just a way for people to grow and thrive if they're willing to get their hands dirty.
If you were going to be a monopolist of one thing, what would it be? Dave, go. Cigars? Single malt?
Yeah, it would definitely be booze, because that survives any recession or Great Depression. You mean in the defense tech space, I assume?
Oh no, that was a total unserious question.
Yeah,
that was a totally unserious question.
Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey.
Simon, you better have a snappy answer to this one. What would you?
The internet. I would monopolize the internet. I'd be the richest man that ever lived for the rest of time.
You sure would be. Well, get in on Web3. I hear it's going to be big.
Yeah, it's going to take off. I put the internet in my refrigerator, so I'm pretty set. I think I got this one in the bag.
I don't even know what that means.
The Internet of Things, man. Come on. You got to connect all your shit to the internet.
Oh, that's what you mean. Yeah, the connected refrigerator. Yeah. That'll be your breach point for now.
That's how I'm
being
getting
the internet monopolist. Yeah. Web3 is applied to refrigeration. Okay, gents, what's coming up on in our worlds over the next week? You guys got anything you want to call up before we wrap? Soft week next week. That's big. Apparently big. I don't know. People try and make it a big deal. I don't.
It's in Tampa. I try not to get too far away from the capital. Something could go wrong.
Yeah, you don't want to let go of that tiller, dude. You got to keep this boat on track. Yeah. Okay. Well, I thought Soft Week might bring up some interesting conversation. I guess not.
It's no modern day Marine, but it's fine.
Modern day Marine. That's right.
I feel very passionately about it. I'm just intentionally biting my tongue.
Well, I mean, we haven't held back on criticizing trade shows and events on this forum before. Dave, let loose. What do you think? Again, no general officers, no flag officers, no senior SESs are listening to this podcast. Let it rip. Make this the soundbite. Make this the soundbite for the thumbnail that'll go out on LinkedIn later.
We're sending a whole bunch of folks to Soft Week because they have pre-planned and scheduled engagements with people that will all happen to be in Tampa for Soft Week.
That's the diplomatic answer.
And we will attempt to avoid. I think it's a 3-day frat party.
There we go.
Yeah.
And I hate spending $1,200 a night for hotel rooms and watching the mayor get kidnapped. I was
about to say, they're going to kidnap you just like the mayor. You better watch out.
Yeah.
You know what, Dave? Though going back to the initial kind of icebreaker to the conversation, I'm chewing a cigar. Ybor City is right there next to Tampa. It's like the cigar capital of America.
A Cuban coffee and a cigar in Ybor is really the only draw for going down there. But you don't have to go down there during Soft Week to get a Cuban coffee and a cigar in Ybor. You can. It's open all year long.
Not to ask, I'm just dumb, but not to ask too dumb of a question. Is Cuban coffee? Are you talking about like a Cuban roast? Are you talking about a Cubano, which is like heavy on sugar and it's just like espresso and sugar? What are you talking about?
I actually don't know. I remember very tasty, very dense, very rich coffee in Ybor. Yeah, and I actually don't know the nomenclature for it.
Yeah, well, that might be the only thing that draws me to Soft Week if I end up going. Okay, gents, this is a wrap. I enjoyed the conversation. I think we covered literally every base. For those out in listener land, if you enjoy the conversation, great. Give us a follow, subscribe to the podcast. refer other folks to it if you found it valuable. This is the kind of community service that I think should be widely consumed and refined over time, so that we become a useful point of your weekly battle rhythm. So follow us in the socials, follow us on your podcast platform of choice, watch us on YouTube. I think we're better live with video, personally, especially if you want to see Simon's haircut. His is that a Jinx proof shirt? Call out to
it is a Jinx proof shirt. Shout out to the best tattoo shop in DC.
Yeah, agree. Full agree. Okay, gents, thanks. This is a wrap. We'll see you next time.